Welcome to What in the World, a project initiated by Hungry for Life International. Today's podcast is titled The Climate of the Church, and Jess will be interviewing Dwayne Toews. So grab your headphones, sit back, relax, and listen as they talk about major factors that have affected the church in the last couple of years.
Hi, and welcome to another week of the What in the World podcast. I never really know how to introduce these, and I've been made fun of for saying Happy Monday and welcome back, so I'm just going to say you're here. That's great. Thanks for joining. First of all, thanks for everyone who's been listening and sending your comments and engaging with us on this podcast. We love your feedback and we'd love to hear more. So feel free to drop us a line, meaning a comment in any of our social medias or a message. It really helps. Or share this with friends and family. It goes a long way. So today we are talking about a topic that people maybe haven't given two hoots about. I'm not sure. But that is the climate of the church in North America. And here to discuss this topic today is Dwayne Toews. Hi, Dwayne.
Hi.
Did I say your last name right?
You did, yes. You must be working in Chilliwack because it's only in this part of the Fraser Valley that people typically get that correct.
Toews.
So, yeah, Toews.
Not Toews.
Not Toews.
Okay.
It's Toews.
And Dwayne is the Assistant Director Superintendent of the Canadian Pacific District of the Christian and Missionary Alliance.
There you go.
I did it.
You did. Yeah. Most people don't get it all figured out.
So basically he oversees, I think you said 82 churches. Is that right?
Yeah, we have 82 Christian Missionary Alliance churches in BC.
Okay.
And so I'm part of a team that oversees them, enabling them to lean into all that God has called them to be and to do. And I particularly work in the area of leader development. So it's a fun job. I get to work with men and women who are exploring becoming a pastor or exploring church ministry. So that sometimes is 2-3 years before they actually become a pastor, through to about 5-6 years into their journey. Cool. And so lots of leader development pieces, get to watch them grow and change. And it's not necessarily young people, it's new people. Because we got lots of people who are coming into pastoral ministry as second careers. And so I get to walk with them and journey with them, and amongst other things in my role. But that's the big piece for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So overseeing leaders and 82 churches within the Alliance, I feel like you have a good finger on the pulse as far as the climate of the church. And which we'll get to.
Yeah.
But I think you do. But before we get into that, how did you get connected with Hungry for Life? Side note, Dwayne is on our board.
Yeah, I am.
So, but how did you first get
Well, I actually, and I can't remember what year it was. I remember when Dave Blundell became the youth pastor at Chilliwack Alliance Church, right. And I worked in youth ministry with Dave. Okay. And probably in the mid-90s, we actually began Shekinah together. So
I didn't know
it was actually, it actually kind of the genesis of it was, it came out of a young adults initiative, married young adults initiative at Chilliwack Alliance. And I was leading it from a musical perspective. But at the time, I had no training in pastoral ministry and in speaking. And Dave actually became part of the team, learning how to play guitar at the time, and would hold it all together with bridging and the preaching and the teaching side of it. So we got to know each other then.
Nice. And
through that journey. And then I stepped out of Shekinah when I became a pastor because I just ran out of time. But I'd always kept my eyes and my ears and my heart tuned to what God was doing through Dave and through HFL and tons of friends that were part of it. And so when I had the opportunity and was asked to step back on or to come onto the board, it was an immediate yes, because I really believe not only in its mission and its vision, but those things line up with who I am as a believer in Jesus, which we'll talk about later. So.
Cool.
So I'm excited to be on the board. And
so for those who don't know, Shekinah, it was a citywide worship event that was started by you guys a long time ago.
A long time ago.
Do you play an instrument?
I do. I was a worship pastor for years, so I play Guitar. I play bass guitar.
Oh,
I
no way.
primarily play keys.
Okay.
And I sing.
So let's just jump into this topic.
Okay.
Because we're on a time crunch here, and this is a good one. This topic, I feel like it could go a lot of ways, but I want to focus on how the last 2 years and what the last 2 years has done to Christians, but like how they feel about the church, and also what do we need to be on guard for, and just how can we gain a bit of perspective given the last 2 years was what it was. I don't want to say that word, but we all know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
So, what's your sense? Do you feel like the climate of the church, or the spiritual temperature of the church, however you want to call it, have you seen it shift since COVID? There, I said it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure shift is the right word. I would say things have become pretty clear. So in the life of the church, the called out people of God, we're not talking about necessarily just the church buildings. Mm-hmm. It became really apparent pretty early on where people's trust, where people's trust were, where their relationship with God was at, because for a number of people, as I work with our churches, so much of their relationship with Jesus was tied up in what they do on a weekend. It was tied up on which building they attend, and they would never say it that way. It would never be preached that way. But when the outer structure was pulled away, and we were unable to gather the way we normally do, all of a sudden you started to see people who were completely lost. People that didn't know how to think for themselves, people that didn't know how to navigate theology for themselves, because they were used to showing up on a Saturday night or a Sunday morning and having it given to them in a certain way. And so a lot of people were, it's not a great word, but were completely discombobulated. What do I do? How do I navigate faith? Because I'm just used to the structure, which was gone. There were others, though, who went deep quick, and they realized that all that had been fed into them through the churches they knew it up until that point of their lives, this was the opportunity to start living it out. And so as I talked to pastors around the province, there were, by and large, the majority of our churches, while there was lots of tension and there was lots of unknown and fear around what might happen and where this was going, there was story after story after story of life change, of ministries that were busting open in different ways. One of our churches, it was one of our Chinese churches, which still, most of those churches still have weekly prayer meetings that they do on like a Wednesday or Thursday night. And this was a larger church, and they said for the last 10 years, their average attendance at their prayer meetings, 20 to 25 people, it burst to over 100 consistently, and it's still happening. People just went, we're in. And we feel the pressure. We don't know what's happening, but we're going to go deep. And all of these theological truths that have been taught to us, we're living out. So really, it was polarizing. There are people who are lost,
yeah,
and there are some who are. It's almost as though they would say, "We've trained for this all our lives, and here we go."
Yeah. Well, I heard the pressure cooker analogy a lot. Like COVID kind of threw everyone into a pressure cooker, and it kind of either just it either made you this way or it made you that way. And so I know exactly what you mean. Like people either it's like fight, flight, or freeze. People kind of went into that response.
Right. Yeah.
So would you say overall that you experienced or noticed like a negative impact or a positive one, or was it kind of 50-50?
50-50 may be a little too cut and dry. Again, I would say the majority of our churches, if you actually sat down with their leadership, they would say that we have seen the hand of God sustain us. We have seen the hand of God move in our people, and we are further along the line of mission than we were before. But I would say there's still a large percentage of churches that their primary goal became, how are we going to get through this? And their view on the life of the church was, how do we hang on to what we've got? How do we not lose what we had? And all of their structures kind of pivoted to maintenance. Those are the churches that we've discovered are really, really struggling. And not just churches, but volunteers and staff who just kind of close the fist and go, I'm just going to get through it. And you start to burn out and you start to hit the wall, and everything becomes pretty dark pretty quickly. And I remember one of our pastors phoned me. This is like 4 days into it, and just said, Dwayne, this is going to be a long 3 weeks. And
3 weeks.
But that was the mentality. Like, we're just going to get through this hurdle, and it'll be back to normal, and away we go.
Just hold on for those 3 weeks. Yeah.
And so, but I would say, we expected to hear lots of doom and gloom in the life of the church and its mission. And we didn't. We actually heard men and women, young and old, are coming to faith, where our gospel reach is increasing exponentially, because all of a sudden we've got new audiences. They've embraced the online, the podcast, the culture. And in some respects, culture has been asking for this shift for a long time.
Right.
I engage in my own conversation with my own kids, and it's like, when will the church understand, some of the new things that are out there? In fact, our pastor talks about, years ago, hockey night in Canada analogy. I mean, you could only watch hockey by going, like early on, and then you could watch it or listen to it on the radio, or go, and then on TV or the radio, or go. And when was the church going to start to take a look at how to engage the greater culture, not become the greater culture, but to engage it?
Right.
And this presented some, I would say, pretty cool opportunities that many churches have embraced.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, you can look at every one of these kind of situations. There's little nuggets of opportunity, and it's whether or not you grasp onto that. What about the leaders? Like, I feel like the poor leaders got sent into a total tailspin of, like, how do we adapt now, quickly? How do we, like, manage our sheep, and how do we not let people fall by the wayside and crash with mental health issues? And I feel like mental health issues suddenly kind of jumped up to, like, a top issue that churches were facing. Is that what you've experienced as well? Like, I don't want to blanket statement anything.
Yeah, no, and I'll be careful how I say this, but I would say, what I can say is the leadership in the church, and I'll just talk about pastors at this point in time, this landed really, really hard on them for a couple of reasons. One is, most leaders now were working in an arena that they weren't trained for. As someone who preached, 42, 43 times a year from a pulpit, to live people, to actually move to doing that on a TV screen, which I'm still doing in lots of churches, is a skill that I didn't have. And it was difficult to get there. It was unnerving, because so many of us, whether you're a worship pastor or a children's pastor or the preacher, so much of what we do is fed by what we're sensing in the room. Like I was preaching this past Sunday at Chilliwack Alliance. I'm looking at the people. I'm watching for engagement. Moving that online, I felt lost, and our pastors were feeling lost. Like, there's skills that they needed that they didn't have, and they were holding those up against some of the pastors who may have been younger or may have been ahead of the curve, who were already well down this road, and now they're trying to compare themselves. And they were making these really poor comparisons, and now they're feeling the pressure of trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Right.
And they can't.
Right.
So that was hard for our pastors.
Yeah.
But the second piece that became and is extremely difficult in our churches is the high level of polarization. No, so you just need to understand that as someone who attends a church, when you ask your pastor to weigh in on these issues, it is a lose-lose for him or her.
Yeah.
Because no matter what their answer is, there is a high amount of people in the church that will have the complete opposite opinion of him or her.
Yeah.
And in all of the leadership degree stuff that I've done, they never taught us how to lead in a polarized culture. You know, we learn how to lead in multi-generational stuff, multi-ethnic. We can navigate some of the nuances of what church should sound like or look like or feel like, but we've never been taught how do we lead in a congregation where maybe 50% of your congregants are saying you should respond this way to the situation at hand, and 50% are saying if you do that, we're out. Your pastor is hooped.
Totally.
And if you don't understand that, when you go to ask them to weigh in on your side or with your perspective or to make a statement, you're crushing them. Because there's theological perspectives on both sides of the issue.
Right.
I mean, and so that's been really hard for our churches.
Yeah. So I remember last year, I feel like so long ago, I was listening to a sermon from The Village. I think it was Mark Clark.
Yep.
And he was saying, mark my words, the vaccine is going to cause division in the church. And this is so early on. I don't think the vaccine was even a thing yet. Right. But Satan heard. He knows what's happening. He's smart. And I think he saw a massive opportunity, which was right in between those polarizing opinions. And he was like, in I go. And yeah, that I feel like you're right. Leaders are in a total lose-lose situation with that, because suddenly we're dealing with a huge division crisis in the church.
Yeah.
I don't know what's your take on that?
And up until now, I would say that while it's been complex and to a certain degree it's been divisive, I'm not talking about vaccines. I'm talking about just churches being able to meet and not meet, and restrictions and those sorts of things. It's still been pretty cut and dry. You can do this, you can't do this. At the end of the day, if churches are going to defy the orders, well, here's what will happen. You'll either get fined or you'll get closed down. Pretty clear. Now we're moving into lots of shades of gray here, because the opinions and the understandings and the fears and the angst around vaccinations or proof of vaccination is now all under the waterline. And it's going to start, it is already dividing from within. Because, there's strong opinions on both sides. But we struggle, I think, as a people, and this would be in the church and I think out of the church, to debate and engage in healthy, constructive conversations where we disagree. And this is coming out to light now in the church, where we've got an issue around vaccines or proof of vaccination that has just begun, and the church is relatively removed from it today. Most likely it won't. It'll become more pointed as this pandemic continues on. And do we have the ability to actually sit down with people who we're called to love and walk with and serve Jesus with, and actually have healthy, constructive conversations where we may agree to disagree, but still go arm in arm serving the King? Can we do that? Or will fear win the day? Because so much of this conversation, just before we went on to the podcast, we were having a conversation here, and it was the issue people think is vaccinations. It's not the issue. Nope. The issue is managing people's expectations and managing people's fears. Where is this going? Where does this stop? Do we trust those that are putting in place, or don't we? If we do trust, is that foolish? All of these questions now are in play, and we don't have a good ability, I believe, at a local church level to engage those conversations. In a perfect world, you could pull everybody into a room, you could have the right people on the platform, and you could just have a great, what I would call an adult conversation. That's that's pretty difficult to do with the toxicity and the rhetoric that's out there on both sides.
And it just seems like everyone is believing that their way is the right way.
Correct.
And it's okay. Have you read the book Until Unity?
No.
Oh, okay. It's a great one. I want to read a quote out of
Yeah.
it. It's written by Francis Chan.
Yeah.
Like a marriage that has no purpose, many churches have forgotten the point of their existence. They can quickly focus on the complaints of their people rather than the cries of the lost. We get emotional over Christians leaving to go to a different church than we do about people dying and going to hell. Something is horribly wrong when we grieve more deeply over people rejecting us than those who reject their Messiah. And that was kind of like the crux of the book. And it really hit home. Like, I don't think he meant to write it for this period of time, but it just happened to. Yeah. And everyone is just so focused on, oh, I'm right. And if you don't see it my way, well, we can part ways. And it's.
Yeah, we're willing to allow that to happen because we think that that's the best outcome.
And I don't want a blanket statement for other people's experiences. I understand that lots of people have very positive experience throughout this, and they've had many of those adult type conversations and come out healthier than before. But it just seems like in North America, this is a big the foothold for the enemy, and he's just having a freaking heyday with all of this going on.
Yeah, Pastor Matt at Goshulak Alliance, and so I sit on the board there, and when we were navigating, how do we navigate this as a board, he just kept saying this statement, and I can't remember where he got it from, but he just said, "What does love require of us here?" And when I'm walking into situations with or conversations with people who may be on the other side of the pole than I am, around these issues, I'm asking myself the question, what does love require of me? And, this is interesting. It's a good segue, I think, into, what I think the church needs to be about in this period of time. Because, in Luke 19, Jesus said, I came to seek and save the lost. That's why I'm here. And I believe that as we as believers walk in the Spirit and we become more and more like Jesus, the things that break his heart are the things that will break our heart. If we are growing in our faith, if we are becoming more and more like Jesus, the things that he cares about the most are the things we're going to care about the most. And I'm not sure he cares the most about whether or not so-and-so stays at the church or leaves the church, but he cares so much about men and women, young and old, across this planet rejecting or accepting who Jesus is. And we have an opportunity right now in our differences to actually demonstrate to the world, not just how to do this well, but to actually demonstrate to our world Jesus. Because around Jesus there were people that had different opinions. They different schools of thought, different not different ideologies, but different perspectives on how things were to be done. And yet they could come together, understanding that the most important thing was that no one was lost. And I think that's where the church needs to be at, not whether or not, not just trying to figure out how do we keep the most people coming into our building and keep more money coming into I get the fact that we need to pay the bills, but that can't be primary. And so the church has an opportunity right now, because it's not only spinning in a weird way in the church, it's spinning in a weird way in all sectors of society, and other sectors of society have no idea how to navigate this either. We have an opportunity to say, here's how people who differ can come together in unity, but not just for the purpose of being unified, but for the purpose of gospel impact. And so I think the church there's lots of challenges ahead of it, but I think the opportunities right now are unlike anything we've ever seen. A few months ago, I remember there was some guys in my backyard, and they were cutting down a tree, and they were way up there cutting this tree down, and one of the branches had fallen in my yard, and So the guy had come into the yard to pick the branch up, to take it back to his truck, to chip it up, get rid of it. And so as I was walking with him, he goes, "So how are you handling all this craziness that's going on in our world?" He goes, and he just started dropping all sorts of language that I won't put on the podcast. And I said, I think I'm doing okay. He goes, "Well, why are you doing okay?" And I had an opportunity then and there to actually talk about my faith and how I was navigating it. Those opportunities are everywhere. Yeah. People are way more open to conversations around the world about who Jesus is today than they were a year and a half ago. So,
yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, we have such a huge opportunity to show Christ's love, like you said, never before. And as we were talking about this before, but as I was sort of preparing for this podcast and praying through like my own convictions, the word humility kept coming up, and a passage kept coming up too, which I just want to read right now, which is Philippians 2, verse 1-4, which is, "So if there's any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind." This is the kicker. "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others." And that's hard.
What does love require of us? Right there.
It's hard, especially when you may be dealing with your own issues and you're trying to grapple with the purpose of this all, and you're struggling. And then God is like, do nothing for yourself. Look to others. Love others. It's not that easy, but we have opportunity. We need to ask God to show it to us and look for it. But, and another quote, I saw another one. No, I heard of another one. I want to say Andrew Murray was the one who quoted this. "Humility is perfect quietness of heart. It is to expect nothing, to wonder at nothing that is done to me, to feel nothing done against me. It is to be at rest when nobody praises me and when I am blamed or despised." I'll skip that, but where I can go, sorry, I'm skipping a line, so I'm botching up the quote. Where I'm at peace, as in a deep sea of calmness, when all around and above is trouble. So it's there. The peace is there. God is offering it to us. It's just hard in this climate where us as North Americans, we focus on ourselves a lot. And what is the church doing for me? I don't like this music. Which church can I go to where I like that music? Well, I like that music, but I don't like that preacher, and like all that kind of stuff. And COVID has kind of allowed a lot of church hopping and that kind of thing. So I wanted to just sit down with you for perspective and gain a little bit of
and I think COVID has allowed and caused believers to look themselves or their church in the mirror and say, what is most important? What is God calling us to do and to be? And when I say to do, I'm not referring to how to do it, like the methodology of the church, but to actually say, what is our mission? What is our purpose? Because I'll play my cards here a little bit. I have a strong disagreement with the narrative out there that the church has been somehow muted in its ability to accomplish its purposes through all of this.
Okay.
We have not been asked to stop preaching the name of Jesus. We've been required to do it differently. But all of us who have been in pastoral ministry or nonprofit relief and development, we're always having to be creative with how we present the gospel in unique places and in unique circumstances and situations. Just in my opinion, in the Western church, in the North American church, it's never been in our face, and And it has been. And we've been forced to go, all right, what does this mean for us? And to ask really good questions. But again, what does love require of us? What does it mean to lay down my rights for the sake of somebody else's? Man, we haven't had to practice that. And now we do, because it's front and center all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. My next question just seems too out of left field, so I feel like I might just skip it because it was the segue to Hungry for Life and what we do.
Yeah.
But, you know what? Let's just ask it. Do you think that a focus on global ministry would help the climate of the church? And why or why not?
Yeah. I actually don't think it's out of left field, and I don't think it's difficult to segue.
Okay, great.
And
Awesome.
As a pastor, that's what we do. We segue all sorts of things all the time. It goes back to what I said earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, HFL is uniquely positioned to help churches and help people and groups in churches and organizations connect with opportunities and fields all over the world through in various capacities. Going back to what I said earlier, that as we grow to become like Jesus, we become passionate about the things that he became passionate about. I don't know how you can become more and more like Jesus and not have an increasing passion for the world to know who Jesus is, particularly in areas where the gospel hasn't been preached, where churches haven't been established. And so I think HFL and connection to HFL for churches and for individuals is a wonderful opportunity and connection to come back to what is most important. And it's not connecting to HFL, but it's ministering to the lost. It's reaching out to those who are disenfranchised, who aren't going to listen to a gospel presentation because they're hungry.
Right.
Those are galvanizing pieces of the church. That's what we do together, irrespective of whether or not we're able to walk through the four walls of our church. And I get the fact that we can't get on air. Well, I guess we can get on airplanes now, but we've had to do even that and the connections differently over the last 18 months. But I think HFL is uniquely positioned to help churches and individuals in churches really connect with what the core of the gospel is and what Jesus's passion is, and that is to seek and save the lost. So absolutely, I think it goes together.
You just did my job for me. Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah, and I was kind of going to explain the model of Hungry for Life, which 17 years ago, Dave and that team of people based creating Hungry for Life off of a need to address the spiritual temperature of the church.
Right.
Which, yeah, we have this model, which I'm going to try and explain to those listening, which is not going to be so easy. Maybe we can get a visual of it if you're watching this. Maybe. So on one side of the model is a building, and it represents the Church of North America. On the other side is a globe, and then arrows are going from the building to the globe, from the globe back to the building, and HFL is a small little piece in the middle that acts as the bridge for that. And yeah, like Hungry for Life, they address that. They address the spiritual temperature of the church because they found that when people are engaged in focusing on, like Matthew 25:40, serving the lost, feeding the hungry, taking care of the widows, it unifies people and it fuels their cycle of generosity, and it gets them, it raises the spiritual temperature or the climate of the church because it's something that brings them together to display Christ. And so, yeah, I mean, 17 years ago, that model was made, but I definitely believe it's relevant today. It just looks different. It looks different for each church, and it looks different for each individual. And sorry, did you want to say something?
I would say even to be a little more dogmatic, it actually pulls people together around the core purpose and vision for every believer's life. I mean, we all go to different churches which have different visions and different purpose statements, and absolutely going, participating with through HFL in a field, and it comes back to the local church like you described. But it also shows exactly what we're supposed to be about as believers, irrespective of what church we go to, irrespective of what what our church statement is and where our church is going. This is what we're called to do, and that's for each one of us. And so I think HFL does a great, working through HFL, I think it just becomes really clear that this is the unifying piece for the church, not just my church.
Right.
Yeah.
The church as a whole. Yeah, and kind of wrapping it up here, something that was on my heart that I just wanted to share is that there's a lot of noise happening right now. Noise is distracting us, and I believe Satan is using that as a weapon against us. And there's so many people who want to be heard, and they believe that they're right, but I just want to focus on the fact that every single individual deserves compassion, and they deserve love and to be heard. And as Christ followers, I think let's not worry about those polarizing sides. Let's focus upwards. Let's reconnect with Jesus. I'm not saying we're not connected, but and talk to him. Like, who does God need you to love today? You might not like the answer, and it might require a personal sacrifice, either emotionally or financially. But God never leaves us depleted, and that's kind of where I want to leave that. And do you want to add anything to that?
No, I just again, this is probably the greatest challenge for the church in my lifetime and your lifetime. Probably going back to the early 1900s, this is the greatest challenge, but I think this is the greatest opportunity. And while I can't quote the dates and times, most revivals, most uptakes in gospel proclamation and men and women coming to faith come out of great adversity. And so, church, it's time to rise up. It's time to be the church, the called out people of God, proclaiming the name of Jesus and coming together in strength and in unity to do that. And this is our moment. I think we'll look back on these 2, 3, 4, however long this is going to go.
4 years.
Yeah, well, maybe that's wrong. But this period of time, we'll look back and we'll go, we either rose to the challenge or we let opportunities slip away. And so I would just say, this is our opportunity. Let's rise to it in the power of the Spirit.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
I have nothing more to add to that.
And there we go.
Thanks for joining us,
No
Dwayne.
problem.
Really appreciate it.
My pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Okay. Well, everyone have a great Monday. Because that's, All right. That's it.
Thanks for listening to What in the World, where we seek to educate and inspire. Here at Hungry for Life, we are passionate about your group having a global impact and eradicating needless suffering. For more information, head over to our website at hungryforlife.org. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you may listen to podcasts. Tune in every other week for another conversation about what is happening at Hungry for Life.